in preparations for the 2026 FIFA World Cup. We'll discuss this and more of today's top headlines. I'm Ernie Manouse.
And I'm Houston Public Media reporter Michael Adkison. We'll also discuss a new state analysis on Texas's water crisis with Sarah Kirkle, Policy and Legislative Affairs Director for the Texas Water Association.
Plus, Performing Arts Houston joins us to tell us about their upcoming 2026-27 season, which is their diamond season.
And as always, we want to hear from you. Give us a call or text at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. You can also watch us live on YouTube by going to houstonpublicmedia.org and clicking the purple box.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, by Metro, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Iran is threatening to attack commercial vessels that try to transit the Strait of Hormuz without permission or any U.S. warship that helps. Earlier, President Trump said the U.S. military would help ships leave the waterway where a blockade has disrupted oil and other shipments and caused an unprecedented energy crisis. As NPR's Mara Liasson reports, President Trump calls the operation Project Freedom.
Trump has described this as a humanitarian mission to help ships that are stuck in the strait and running low on supplies. U.S. Central Command says it will involve guided missile destroyers, more than 100 aircraft, 15,000 service members. But this is not so much an escort service, a military escort, rather than it's to guide them. In other words, to show them where the safe routes are without sea mines. Iran says the whole thing violates the ceasefire.
NPR's Mara Liasson reporting. Early voting started over the weekend in Louisiana, where the governor has suspended U.S. House races, though they still appear on the ballot. Aubrey Uhas of member station WWNO reports some people are casting votes anyway.
U.S. House races are on hold after last week's Supreme Court ruling threw out Louisiana's map, and officials say any votes cast won't be counted. Lawmakers are expected to meet this week to work on passing a new map that could eliminate one or both of the state's majority black districts. Saria Jackson cast her ballot in the state's primary during early voting on Saturday. She says it was unreasonable for the state to suspend House races at the last minute.
Nowhere near reasonable. They're literally trying to take power from the people.
Multiple lawsuits filed by voters, voting groups, and candidates argue it's also illegal. For NPR News, I'm Aubrey Uhas in New Orleans.
The U.S. Supreme Court's temporarily allowing women seeking abortions to obtain the pill mifepristone through the mail or at a pharmacy without having to visit their doctor in person. The High Court blocked a federal appeals court ruling that imposed restrictions last week. Week 2 of the trial pitting billionaire Elon Musk against OpenAI CEO Sam Altman is getting underway in California. Here's NPR's John Ruwitch.
Musk sued OpenAI, Altman, and another founder for, in his words, stealing a charity. OpenAI was founded as a nonprofit, but Musk says a for-profit arm set up to attract investment and talent has become the main thing. And he says Altman and others have cashed in. Musk helped found OpenAI, but he said in court last week he had been a fool to put tens of millions of dollars into it in the early days. That's because the other founders, he says, treated it as seed capital. Altman is expected to testify in the coming days. The lawyer representing him and the company say Musk is just bitter. They argue he had no problem with the idea of OpenAI launching a for-profit arm and raising billions of dollars until, that is, it became successful, and he started his own competitor, xAI. John Ruwitch, NPR News, San Francisco.
This is NPR.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Tom Perumian. Congressman Christian Menefee and Al Green are both vying for the same seat in the Democratic primary runoff election for Texas' 18th congressional district. But News 88.7 political reporter Andrew Schneider says the two are on the same page when it comes to backing new voting rights legislation in the wake of the Supreme Court's decision last week to gut a key provision of the Voting Rights Act.
Menefee says there's no chance Congress will pass new voting rights legislation as long as Republicans are in charge. He says Democrats need to make it a top priority the next time they return to power.
It is going to be incumbent upon us that next time we get the majority, that we do whatever is necessary. I don't care if it means suspending the filibuster, do whatever we can to make sure that we have fair access to the ballot box so that we can continue this pursuit of a true multiracial, multicultural democracy.
Green released multiple statements calling for protests after the Supreme Court's ruling. If we are indeed being forced to revisit the struggles of the 1960s, Green said, then we must be prepared to meet this moment with the same resolve those struggles required. I'm Andrew Schneider in Houston.
Residents in Magnolia have approved raising the area's sales tax. Over the weekend, a proposition which was pushed by the Magnolia Fire Department said it would need more money as the area expands. According to ABC 13, 80% of the 500 people that voted said they would favor increases in sales tax to 8.25%. That's the maximum allowed by the state. The Magnolia Fire Department said in a statement that they were grateful for the support. Taking your check of weather, it's going to be sunny today with a high of 82 degrees. Clouds will be moving in tonight, along with some gusty winds, a low of 70. Right now, partly cloudy, 74 degrees on the UH campus. Get more news and information. Go to HoustonPublicMedia.org. I'm Tom Perumian, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include United States Postal Service, dedicated to putting reliability at the core of USPS Ground Advantage to help businesses operate smoothly. More at USPS.com/groundadvantage.
Live from Houston Public Media and News 88.7, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now, Hello Houston.
Hello, Ernie Manouse here, and sitting next to me,
Who is it?
Michael Adkison.
Howdy.
You are helping me launch a new series I'm calling Mondays with Mikey.
I like the name. I will say my next time I'm hosting will be next Tuesday, so it's kind of temporary.
We already ruined that one, didn't we? That didn't last.
It didn't last very long.
Well, this Monday is with Mikey. Michael Adkison, as you may know, is one of our intrepid reporters over in the newsroom. You've been on a lot talking about space. That was a big area you chatted about. So fill people in just a touch about who is Michael.
I was born by the river. No. No, I moved to Houston just last fall. Really was excited to be part of the Houston Public Media team, and it has just been such a privilege. And it was really exciting to be here as Hello Houston was sort of launching and getting on its feet, and it has been so much fun to be on you guys' show and talk with you guys. I think the conversational style and answering people's questions directly is really what makes Hello Houston stand out, and that's what I've enjoyed the most.
And what's cool about that is if you have questions, comments, or want to be part of the conversation, as always, remember, you can reach out to us by calling us 713-440-8870 or emailing us talk@hellohouston.org, and we'll be monitoring all that. Of course, and also, unlike what you usually get as a radio reporter, but this plays into your background, we stream live over on YouTube.
Yes.
So people can watch you on TV-ish.
TV-ish. I like it. We're TV adjacent. But I suppose that's where the industry is going, TV adjacent, you know? Mm-hmm. How many people are actually sitting there watching TV these days?
Do you watch broadcast television?
Do I watch broadcast television? That is a good question. No. And
that was a short answer.
And I don't know the last time I sat to my TV and turned it onto cable or satellite. You know, I have all the streaming services, so I'll watch live stuff when they're, streaming the Oscars. I'll watch that. Mm-hmm. But turning on the TV, no, I don't think I do. I really don't, which is kind of sad considering I used to work in TV news. Yes. I feel like I'm going to get in trouble for saying that.
Brandon Tartikoff, I've referenced him in the past. Somebody that I really admired. He was a programmer and television creator over at NBC, and he wrote a book called The Last Great Ride. He's no longer with us, but he talked about back in the late 90s about how the television landscape was going to change.
Yeah.
And people were not ready for it. And it was going to be so different that no longer would programmers have the power they have because everyone would be able to program what they watch, pick what they want. And the other point he made was TV would no longer be those great water cooler moments, because with everyone having the freedom of seeing what they want when they want, there'll be very few of those things left. So like Who Shot JR, or those soap opera nighttime program things that everybody was glued to watch. The last episode of Seinfeld.
I was born in the 90s. I don't know what Who Shot JR. Just kidding.
But those points don't exist except for maybe sporting events or the Oscars, something like that. But we used to gather around. Everyone saw the same thing the night before. You know, it's very different now when you get to control all of that yourself.
I was actually telling the newsroom, this is a little bit different, more, the TV shows that they put on network TV. My girlfriend and I are watching Lost right now. Old show.
Well, let me tell you. Let me tell you what happens.
Yeah, please. No, don't spoil it. No, I've seen it before, but it was so interesting watching a show that was on in the 2000s and how different the pacing is on that show versus how we have Netflix and HBO today, where it's like, back in the day, you had to have a 45-minute show. Couldn't be, 2 minutes longer, 2 minutes less. It had to be 45 minutes. You had to have commercial breaks. You had to pace it. And there were like 22 episodes a season. They don't do that anymore. It's so interesting.
Is it the Munsters? Do you remember the Munsters?
My dad loved the Munsters.
It only aired for 2 years. And
Really?
there's 87 episodes.
Golly.
That tells you how much they did
And
every single year.
How much, to your point about the water cooler shows, a part of the zeitgeist it was that even I know who the Munsters were, but it was only 2 seasons. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Both the Munsters and the Addams Family premiered the same week and left the air the same week.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting?
That's
and
good
they
trivia.
both were on only for 2 seasons.
That's good trivia.
Anyway, so enough of that, except I will mention, were you a Brady Bunch fan?
Brady Bunch was a little bit before my time. Even that, movie was a little bit before my time.
But
so I've
you
never
didn't
seen it.
grow up seeing the Brady Bunch reruns all the time?
I've seen the theme song.
Well, for those of you that know about the Brady Bunch, Eve Plum is going to do our show in a week or two, maybe. She's going to be on, so we're very excited. She was Jan, for those of you who don't know, the middle
Jan
daughter.
Brady, yes.
She was the one who said, Marsha.
Marsha.
She's coming up on the show.
There you go.
Yeah.
And it
Anyway, let's go to the phones. We have a call in already. Ben is joining us from Sugarland, which I'm excited about, because with all of these guest hosts coming in and stuff, I'm counting on you, our regular loyal listeners and callers, to join the conversation every day. 713-440-8887. Okay, Ben, what's on your mind?
Hey, hello.
Hello.
Welcome, new host.
Hello, how are you?
So I was listening to y'all talking about broadcast television, and you can get a cheap little antenna. It was like $15.
Mm-hmm.
And I watch PBS. They have a little cool Japanese offset station called NHK. Really cool.
Yes. Yeah, so you're one of those antenna folks.
The cord cutters.
Do you watch any of the streaming services, or are you pretty much found everything you need with the channels and their sub channels and their alternate channels? Are you pretty full up on what you can watch?
Oh yeah, I like both. I got streaming, of course, but yeah, the cord cutting's also cool.
Yeah. Well, Ben, thank you for calling and sharing, and for the plug for PBS. So I'm going to make a shameless plug. We are just in the process of launching HPM Plus, which is Houston Public Media Plus, where you can watch through your over-the-top boxes, so your Rokus and your Fire Sticks and all that. You can watch all of our stations.
Yep.
And you get access to PBS programming, access to programs from our library that were locally produced. So check that out. It's really kind of cool.
It's just incredible. I mean, all the content that's on PBS. I think Downton Abbey's back on there. I don't want to speak too soon, but I do think it's back on there. So, that's a good plug for HPM Plus. But talking about cord cutting, that's what my parents do. My parents have decided they're
not doing any.
They
of
do
it?
have some streaming services, but they don't do cable anymore. They have an antenna.
Cable was so expensive, but now I wonder, with all of the services that I grab, if I'm not paying more.
If you're not paying more.
Than I did.
And they do the bundles. They do the Disney Plus, Hulu, HBO Max bundles, to where it's like, is this not just cable? Like, is this not what it used to be?
Because you don't have to do subscriptions. You can buy it monthly. The hack. Here's my hack. I don't do it, but you can if you're stronger than I am. You do the hack where you get one service for 1 month, then you cancel it. You get another service for the next month. And you rotate through the major services, because they all store up the programs that they have. So if you wanted to watch this show on HBO Max and this one on Hulu and this one on Netflix, well, you can get to it. Then you have a whole month with it, and then you can move on to the next, and you come back in a few months.
There you go.
Money there. There's
Something
your
to think
hat.
about. I love it.
Okay, that's enough of us yammering along here. We've got to still do the things we always do. Coming up on the show today, we're going to talk about the water crisis that's facing Texas. We're also going to be in this hour talking about Performing Arts Houston. They've announced their new season, and we're going to dig into it. But as always, we like to start the show with the headlines, and so we go to the news. Michael, what's in the news?
Well, with just over a month until the 2026 FIFA World Cup, Houston's World Cup host committee has taken over some crucial parts of the Houston area to prepare for hosting its portion of the massive international tournament. That's going to include NRG Stadium, where 7 matches will be played between June 14th and July 4th. But if you've been over there, you'll notice crews have already been working on that area, including removing the name NRG Stadium from the venue. Throughout the World Cup, it's going to be called the Houston Stadium. But even after the World Cup, it's no longer going to be called NRG Stadium. It's going to go back to its original name of Reliant Stadium. Last Friday also marked the beginning of a lengthy process of installing the stadium's pitch, that is the grass that each of the players are going to play on, that's being cultivated specifically for the World Cup. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, the host committee has started taking over parts of East Downtown. That's where organizers are setting up the World Cup Fan Festival, which is a 34-day festival where fans can watch every single match of the World Cup. So, Ernie, it's getting real. We're getting to the wire here on the World Cup. And are you excited for the World Cup? Are you working behind the scenes? Do you plan to attend that fan festival? Give us a call and let us know what you think about all this World Cup madness. 713-440-8870. Ernie, what do you think about the World Cup?
Well, what do I think about the World Cup? I think it takes over the world, and
it does.
It's quite a thing. To go back to what you were actually saying in your story, at first I thought the fan experience being separate from the stadium, I initially didn't like the idea. I thought, wait, you want to be part of where it's at? And then I thought about it. I thought it's going to be so congested around the stadium that to have it in a separate location, they've got the rail, will take you right on down there, theoretically. And I think it's a good plan. I'm excited about it. I'm excited we're going to have it. I had heard, and we had talked about stories where they were saying nationwide that World Cup wasn't selling the hotel rooms they thought it would. It wasn't bringing in the tourists they thought it would. That it's more so they need to bring in outsiders, that locals don't spend as much on these kind of events, so you want the tourists to attract. But in Houston, unlike other cities, Houston is doing well in that regard, and they are filling the hotels. A lot of hotels had holds on blocks of rooms, and they've released those. But not in Houston. They're filling up.
Yeah, Houston, for what it's worth, I've been following the World Cup and covering lots of the events that they've had. And a few weeks ago, FIFA officials, the official representatives from the soccer league, were here in Houston. They've been going to all the cities, the host cities, making sure that they're up to par, that they're doing everything that they need to do, checking in on their plans as we're now a little bit over a month out from the World Cup, which they're calling the biggest tournament in human history, which is kind of insane to wrap your head around. But that being said, they specifically said Houston is one of the best prepared cities for the World Cup. They really liked the fan festival idea. They liked the idea that Houston is making sure that its transportation, its public transportation, is up to par. One thing that really kind of put things into perspective that the representatives from FIFA made note of is, so many of these people who are coming to the United States come from areas that have good public transportation,
right,
and come from areas where they don't have to drive a car. That is not really the case in the United States. You have to have a car to get most anywhere.
That's not the case in Houston.
And
there's a lot of places where public transportation rules the
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what they said Houston has really done a good job of. They praised Metro. They praised the city's host committee for the investments that they've made and the assurances that they've made that, yes, that red line is going to be working as you transport fans from East Downtown to NRG Stadium. So, it's probably just the league line, shall we say, but they have said Houston is one of the best prepared cities for the World Cup.
And what's wonderful, too, we were seeing a lot of people that have been complaining about the work that's being done for the World Cup. And why isn't this being done year-round? Well, there's money issues. There's the ability to do a lot of this work. But when we have one of these kind of events and there's extra money flowing in, even from outside organizations to improve the city, we reap those benefits in a lot of ways after they move on. And so if they're improving the public transit, God bless them, because hopefully then in the fall we have better public transit here in Houston.
Absolutely. And, public transportation is really just a huge part of this. There's also investments in making a more walkable Houston as we head towards the World Cup. People, if you want to brave the heat walking from East Downtown all the way to NRG Stadium, it's doable. And that's what they're saying. It's doable.
You sound as though you speak from experience.
I have not done that. I really look forward to walking 6 miles in the heat to see, can you do this? That's something that I've been pitching to my team for covering. I'm like, I want to walk that and see how feasible it is.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Okay, if you have thoughts, feelings about FIFA coming to Houston, World Cup Mania is beginning. Give us a call, share your thoughts, feelings, 713-440-8870. Here's one people may have opinions about. Houston may soon start charging for trash pickup for the first time. Mayor John Whitmire is expected to propose a new monthly administrative fee starting at $5 and gradually raising up to $25 over several years. The plan would shift the city's solid waste department out of the general fund and into the water and wastewater system, meaning trash services would be supported by fees instead of property and sales tax. City leaders say the change would stabilize the budget, improve service as Houston faces a growing deficit and longstanding issues with trash collection. The proposal expected to go before City Council in the coming weeks. Would you be willing to pay $5 a month to have your trash picked up and eventually $25 a month for trash pickup? 713-440-8870.
You know, it's one of those things that everyone's going to have an opinion on this. You know, everyone's going to have a strong stance. You know, we always hear from viewers, listeners, that the trash situation in Houston is rampant, that, you know, we have lots of trash that's not getting picked up. Lots of people getting frustrated by the way that this is handled. And one of the major notes, I think, on this story that my colleague Dominic Anthony Walsh has made note of is that Houston is the only major city in Texas that does not have any sort of trash fee. So it is one of those things that, of course, nobody wants to pay more for their bills, their services. But at the end of the day, if you want to have the trash problem solved, maybe you do need to start paying a fee to, you know, invest in that and make sure that it's more of a streamlined process.
I guess two things pop into my mind. First of all, if you pay that fee, does that mean things are going to get better? Or are you just paying for the service we currently have because you're just switching it over to another unit that now collects money this way to do the exact same thing it's doing? Does it guarantee there's going to be improvement in trash collection? And then how much more aggravated are you going to be if trash still doesn't get picked up and you're paying a fee? Flip side of that, what about for people who just can't afford it? What happens? Are there grants for that? Does their trash get picked up? Or if you're not paying it, they just leave it in the streets? What happens? And I'm sure there are answers to these questions. I just don't know them. But what happened in other cities? You've got areas where if it goes up to $25 a month, some people can't afford that, or they would choose not to in lieu of other things they need to pay. So what happens?
That's a good question. You know, there's going to be a lengthy process ahead of the city council, as I understand, where they're going to be talking about, you know, what does this look like putting into practice? What are the concerns our residents have, which I'm sure the ones that you raised are some of the concerns that people are going to have. Another note that Dominic has made that I think is really notable is comparing, not only is Houston, as I mentioned, the only city in Texas, the major city that doesn't have one, but comparing the rates. So in San Antonio, as Dominic reports, the monthly garbage fee ranges from about $20 to $35. Austin's is about $29 to $64, and in Dallas it sits at $40. So even $5 and then eventually $25 is still very much towards the bottom of that range compared to other cities. So, you know, looking to see at how other cities have responded to the trash crisis and seeing what works and what doesn't, I think is really going to benefit the Houston City Council.
I just think there's too many regulations about where you can throw your trash to. If I go buy a dumpster,
you want to litter,
something,
is what you're saying.
No, I want to throw my stuff in a dumpster. Or if I've got a big cardboard box, I don't want to call and wait a week for someone to come pick it up. I just want to go toss it in that dumpster over there. But everyone owns their dumpsters. You can't put your garbage. But my garbage can sits out on the street. And they come and they pick it up. By the time I get home from work to take it in, somebody's come by and thrown more garbage in my can. I'm just saying. I started off the day today over on Houston Matters doing the pet peeve segment. So I'm still in my curmudgeon-y mode.
You still have to complain. You still have lots on your mind.
I still have lots to complain about. But you know what I'm not complaining about? Having you here with me for the day today.
Thank you.
We've got a whole lot more shows still to come today, and we hope that you will join us in conversation, topics, and thoughts. It's 713-440-8870. Coming up on Hello Houston, we're going to discuss the water crisis. Yep, they've got one in Texas, and we're talking about it right here on Hello Houston. This is News 88.7.
Meet Dio Choco. We just took his keys for the day and gave him a Ride Metro fare card. This is his story. Visit ridemetro.org/Choco to find out where is Choco.
Most right now is supporting the station that brings you the news and information you rely on. It only takes a few minutes to make a big difference. Join as a new member today at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 888-909-0887.
Houston Matters wants to hear from you about story or guest ideas for future programs, or pet care or gardening questions you'd like us to tackle when those subjects come up each month on the show. Or maybe you have suggestions for how we can improve the program and provide a better public service. Reach out anytime at talk@houstonmatters.org. I'm Craig Cohen. Join us for the next Houston Matters, weekday mornings at 9 here on News 88.7.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from electricityplans.com, helping Houstonians find electricity plans based on home energy usage and rate comparisons. Enrollment details and more at electricityplans.com.
Join us for Hello Houston, weekdays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., taking a deep dive into the stories that matter to Houstonians, keeping you informed, engaged, and entertained. With the generous support from our founding sponsor, Kathy Sanders.
Support comes from Metro. World Cup planning includes transit improvements intended to serve Houston after the final match. Metro provides bus, rail, and paratransit service and continues mobility enhancements across the region. More at ridemetro.org/Metro Now.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, a workers' compensation provider that's been caring for hardworking Texans for over 30 years. More at texasmutual.com/expert partner.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now Ernie Manouse and guest host Michael Adkison.
A new state analysis warns Texas may need at least $174 billion over the next 50 years to avoid a severe water crisis, more than double previous estimates, as population growth, drought, and aging infrastructure strain supplies. And in some places, that future may already be here. Corpus Christi's water crisis has made headlines in recent months, with local reservoirs at critically low levels. Joining us now to help us understand all of this is Sarah Kirkle, Policy and Legislative Affairs Director at the Texas Water Association. Sarah, welcome to Hello Houston.
Thanks for having me.
And if you would like to join the conversation, give us a call or text at 713-440-8870. Sarah, you know, when we were listing off those three crises that are, you know, being faced by the communities, growth of population, drought, and aging infrastructure, I'm curious, what do you see as the biggest concern and what is within our power to respond to?
Well, when I think about the biggest concern, it really is understanding what the problems are and how we got where we are. And so, as you mentioned, if you're talking about 12 to 1,500 Texans moving to Texas every day, none of them are bringing water with them. You have experienced, especially in Houston, a lot of flood crises, and drought is really taking up a lot of the state. And every time you have an event like that, you really see the ground actually shift and break, and that can cause damage to infrastructure. And then economic development that goes along with that population growth. It has really been driving our need for additional water infrastructure in a way that is, in some cases, outpacing our ability to create the water supply to provide for them. So because our water supply can sometimes take decades to get in place, this really fast development has been creating kind of a mismatch in those high growth areas in our ability to provide the infrastructure in a timely manner. But I think all of this is happening against a backdrop that is that all of our cheap, easy water projects have already been developed. So for a lot of communities, they are already using up their local supply. And so in order to meet the growth needs, they've got to go further out. And when you don't have that local water, that means pipelines that are going further, which adds costs. And it's also using water sources that maybe are a little bit more expensive to treat. So when you're talking about desalination, either of seawater or brackish groundwater, these treatment methods are they're a lot more technically advanced, and they're just a lot more expensive.
How close are we actually, though, to that tipping point where we are in the crisis moment where the water just isn't there?
I don't know that we're necessarily at the tipping point. Certainly, Corpus Christi leads us to believe we've really got to take action. I hope that communities around the state are taking note of what's happening there and making sure that they implement their plans. We have a local water planning process that feeds up into our state water plan. It does provide our local folks with an ability to move those projects forward, but it's important to take this seriously. The cost increases are really the biggest barrier that we're seeing to implementation of water projects. In fact, during the Water Development Board meeting where they approved the most recent state water plan draft, they turned down $2.9 billion in state water plan projects because we don't have enough financial capacity to help move them forward. And I'm not talking about grants, I'm talking about subsidized loans. And so you have all these water projects that are in line, waiting to get started or waiting to go to the next step. And we just don't have the financial capacity to be able to help them move along. And ultimately, what that's going to mean is that the costs are going to go up as we continue to delay the projects, and it's going to delay the timelines for getting water supply to some of these communities.
And I guess I ask about the tipping point because I'm wondering if we take heed and do what needs to be done starting today, have we acted fast enough?
I think in some parts of the state, the answer is yes. You can start today and be fine. For other parts of the state, we do have plans in place, and the most important thing that we can do is not delay those projects, which is why moving those water plan projects forward is really important. I mean, if you think about the cost increases that we've experienced just from before COVID, those projects have gone up 2 to 3 times. And we all know inflation is impacting every part of our lives, but in water, it's really having a much larger impact because you have the impacts of specific tariffs, and the inflation rate for the types of materials used in water projects is just that much more expensive. And so if you kick these cans down the road and you don't take care of your issues, it's really going to come home to roost. So I do think that the water managers in Texas understand this. They're planning, for some of them, the uncertainty of which projects are going to move forward is something that is very difficult. So during the last legislative session, for example, we had bills and conversations against building reservoirs, against groundwater export, against desalination, and against aquifer storage and recovery. And so if you're a water manager in Texas, you take a look at this conversation and you think, okay, well, if those types of projects are off the table, then what's left? So we've really got to come to terms with the actual needs of our state and have a more balanced conversation about ways that we can move forward and meet our water supply needs while also balancing those other concerns that local communities have about those projects.
We are talking with Sarah Kirkle, Policy and Legislative Affairs Director at the Texas Water Association. If you would like to join the conversation, call or text 713-440-8870. Sarah, we talk a lot about the different organizations that are involved in this. And I think when you looked at Corpus Christi and the way that all this unfolded, there was a lot of finger pointing, that the state pointed their fingers at the local government in Corpus Christi pointed their fingers at the state. Who bears responsibility in addressing the water crisis? Is it a community effort? Is it a local-led effort? Or is it just everybody has a hand to play in this conversation?
There's a couple of components. I think ultimately water in Texas is still driven at the local and regional level. Corpus Christi is a regional water provider. I think they had plans for this desalination plant in the state water plan. They were continuing to plan and move forward for that. And then when the city council decided not to move forward with that, I think it was very surprising to folks. I do think that the state has a role there in terms of providing the financing. So if the financing isn't available, then certainly the state has a role. But the local governments and those regional providers are really who are driving these conversations. And sometimes they have a challenging role with the community. I mean, water is not super sexy. And so in this, discussion about Corpus Christi, there have been a lot of conversations about the role of, the 2-year election cycle. And, maybe it's not the sexiest thing to talk about water and water rates, as opposed to a new library or a new park. Nobody wants a wastewater plant necessarily named after them, right? And so that in combination with water being somewhat of an invisible problem where as long as the taps are turning on and the toilets are flushing, sometimes people think that it's not a problem. And so water folks are sometimes a victim of their own success, but we have to be mindful that and given the growth and the long timelines for us to get water projects online, it's really important that we're diligent about moving forward.
You talk about water not being that sexy of a political topic. It's so interesting to me as we talk about the water crisis and the images that come to mind as we unpack that. And one of the things that really sticks out to me is just it sounds so antiquated. It sounds like what you see in a Western that takes place, 150, 200 years ago. And yet this is a very real problem that Texans are currently facing or could face in the not so distant future. What does that say to you about sort of the precedent for this and where we are now in 2026 and we're talking about not having enough water potentially?
Yeah, it tells me that we, in many ways, are not valuing water in its true meaning. I mean, we don't blink twice at a $150 smartphone bill, but when it comes to increasing water rates, it's something that people sometimes will bristle at. And so people have taken water for granted for so long that I think it's going to be a real turning point when we have now paid off largely, and this is not the case everywhere, many of our communities have paid off their local infrastructure. And so when they start taking on these bigger projects that are going to mean very large rate increases in order to pass, it's going to be a real test of how much people value their water. I think it's also going to start having impacts on people's use. So I think there are probably we're going to need some very large projects in order to get water to some of those really thirsty areas that drive the economic engine of the state. But at some point, those rate increases are going to get to a place where normal people are going to see those increases and say, well, maybe I'm going to adjust my behavior. Maybe I'm not going to water outside as much. I mean, there are communities in Central Texas where 65 to 80% of the water use is treated drinking water dumped on the ground to water their plants. And so we've got to have a new relationship with water as we move forward. And I think that's one thing that you're seeing with these very large cost increases is a shift to that in that conversation to conservation and reuse, which has been a part of the solution all the time. But in this next water plan, people are counting on that to make up 43% of our new supply. And back in the day, it used to be a lot cheaper to just go build a new reservoir or go get another water supply instead of fixing the pipes that you already have. And that equation has turned on its head. Now it's super important that our communities are thinking about repairing their lines and making sure that we're having a real conversation about keeping the water that we have because it's the cheapest one that we have.
If you want to talk to Sarah and you have questions about our water crisis, give us a call, 713-440-8870. Over at our YouTube, there's a lot of chat going on, but Chef Rob makes a comment and says citizens should not be punished for mismanagement, which makes me look at this in a different way. Is part of the problem here a lack of proper management, or is it simply a resource and need kind of problem?
I am not aware of any mismanagement of water funds. I really believe that communities, when they understand their needs, they typically will take the actions that they need to move forward. I think it's a matter of massive success of our state growing at a rate that our water supplies just haven't kept pace with.
Okay.
Kind of going off of that, you were mentioning what people can do. I think that a lot of people are going to hear this interview and wonder, is it all up to my city leaders, my state leaders, or is there anything I can do? What can be done just at the individual level that our viewers and our listeners can understand of how they can contribute to helping solve this water crisis?
Yeah, I think that folks can be really mindful about their water use at home, whether that's limiting your outdoor use, whether when you're planting, either new developments or looking at your own yard. St. Augustine, for example, incredibly thirsty. And so that's going to take a lot more water to survive than maybe other types of native plants. And so there are definitely ways to curb your own personal use beyond just getting involved at your local government and making sure to support those water and wastewater services that are going to really determine your community's future.
And, I think that what's interesting at the political level is this is a bipartisan issue. I think you hear Republicans talking about it, you hear Democrats talking about it, and yet here we are talking about a crisis that, yes, there have been investments that lawmakers here in Texas have passed, the water fund. What is it going to take, and are we moving quickly enough as you see it to solve this crisis?
You're absolutely right. This doesn't play out in R&D politics at at all. Water really shakes out as, in some ways, it's a rural versus urban in terms of the urban needs and going to the rural areas to get some of those resources. But right now, we're having rural versus rural fights. And, we're having a huge conversation about groundwater management. And that occurs at the very local level at groundwater districts. And there you've got fights of private property rights where you have some who, my private property right means that I get to sell my water and provide that to someone else, and their neighbor may say, well, my private property rights mean I get to conserve my water in place for my future generations. And so that's been something that has really been a new development, seeing some of that even rural versus rural play out.
It seems as though that water planning in Texas tends to be very regional. Is that an error in the way we approach it? Should it be looked at more holistically as an entire statewide or even a region of the country kind of issue as opposed to each community trying to figure it out?
Well, right now, water is still a very local issue. And so I think it will always be, especially at the retail level. But when you're talking big water supply, it is more of a regional conversation. And that's just a matter of cost efficiencies in order to make it more feasible for us to have these projects. But yes, I think local management and regional management is going to get us a long way down the road. I think that there ultimately is going to be the need for the state to pitch in additional dollars in order to get some of these bigger projects done. So there are projects that are likely going to be needed for the bigger urban areas, especially along the I-35 corridor, where there just isn't enough water. And so there will be proposals to move it from areas like East Texas where it rains more. East Texans have not loved that idea. And so that's going to be a political fight that is going to have to work itself out. But I do think you're right that the cost, some of those projects are probably so large that no one entity in Texas, in terms of like a regional water supplier, would be able to undertake on their own. You're going to need to see the state step up in terms of providing some participation in those projects. And we have existing mechanisms for that. It's strictly a matter of having enough money. And Texans really, I'm so proud of them for understanding how important water issues are. They overwhelmingly supported Prop 4 last November, and that's going to send $20 billion into our Texas Water Fund. But that's $1 billion a year for 20 years. And we know that our needs are going to be much greater than that. This massive $174 billion number that we're talking about, that's strictly the state water plan. That doesn't have anything to do with the maintenance and repair of your existing infrastructure. It doesn't cover wastewater. It doesn't cover flood infrastructure. And so we have a lot of different needs within the water community that we don't have the funding to address.
713-440-8870 if you have a question for Sarah, as Patricia does from Crosby. Patricia, what's on your mind?
I'm just wondering if you are considering turning sewer water into drinking water.
Thank you for that. What's your thoughts?
Yes, that is very popular right now. We consider that direct reuse, kind of toilet to tap. And so you see that as one of the most common things that's happening right now. Actually, though, I do want to caution that I hear sometimes an over-reliance on this reuse concept. And reusing your water in some cases is absolutely a better way than just letting it go away. But in other times you really are pulling water from other areas. So, for example, we have meetings in the DFW area. There's always a joke, flush twice for Houston, because the drinking water that it becomes wastewater in Dallas is treated. It's put back into the Trinity River. It comes down to Houston. Houston treats it as your drinking water. And so if Dallas were to keep all of their water and to continue reusing it, that's going to have impacts on Houston. And so we've got to have also a more holistic view of how we're reusing our water. So it is absolutely a part of the equation, but it can't be our only equation. At this point, given how dire our water supply needs are in different parts of the state, I do think that all of the different types of projects really need to be on the table.
Quick question from Cliff that comes in from our YouTube chat. Are rainwater collection systems for residential use a viable option?
I think they can be. Right now they aren't at such a large scale that they're having a massive impact. I think if everyone had one, we would possibly see impacts on our surface water. Those surface water right now, right when it rains, if it's not collected, it runs into our waterways, and there are water rights, and communities rely on those for their drinking water. So if it got to a massive scale, we could have impacts on our surface water rights and that type of surface water availability. For now, I do think that it can be a really viable way. I know different communities have different restrictions. In Austin, we can only use it for irrigation. And so I have some rainwater tanks. I think they really help offset some of my use for some of that irrigation. But to a limit, right? And so we just got to watch. If everybody starts doing it, then we might start having other issues.
Sarah, thank you very much.
Sarah Kirkle is the Policy and Legislative Affairs Director at the Texas Water Association. Sarah, thank you so much for coming on Hello Houston.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Coming up, Performing Arts Houston is in the house. Stay with us as they talk about their upcoming season right here on Hello Houston.
Meet Gamola, songwriter, world-class violinist, and award-winning multi-genre artist. We just took his keys for the day and gave him a Ride Metro fare card. Visit ridemetro.org/Gamola to learn more about his ride.
More of the shows you love anytime. It only takes a few minutes to make a big difference. Become a new member today at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 888-909-0887.
Pen 15 creator Anna Conkle had a tumultuous childhood, often playing peacemaker to her parents' fights.
Divorce started to become more appealing, especially at the end of the 2 years of splitting the house in half. I was like, well, what about the divorce?
How she turned that pain into joy and comedy. That's next time on Think.
You can listen to Think coming up tonight at 11 o'clock.
Houston Public Media is licensed to the University of Houston system, governed by the UH Board of Regents. Information about open meetings, dates, times, and locations is online at uhsystem.edu.
Houston Public Media, in partnership with Texas Southern University, brings to you The Vibe, R&B, hip-hop, and neo-soul, music that resonates with all ages. The Vibe on 88.7 HD3 and on the Houston Public Media app.
Tonight on Houston Public Media TV 8 at 7, Antiques Roadshow returns for more appraisals at Grant's Farm in St. Louis, Missouri. Then at 8, it's episode 5 of Ken Burns' The American Revolution. Tonight on TV 8. Support comes from NAMI Walks Greater Houston, community walks supporting mental health education and support services through the National Alliance on Mental Illness. 2026 NAMI Walks Greater Houston. More at namiwalks.org/Greater Houston.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now Ernie Manouse and guest host Michael Adkison.
Over the past few months, we've invited representatives from Houston's many acclaimed arts organizations onto the show to tell us all about their upcoming 26-27 seasons and to give Houstonians a preview of all the fantastic shows and performances and artists heading soon to the Bayou City. Today, we're putting the spotlight on our good friends over at Performing Arts Houston and their new 60th anniversary season, which they're calling their Diamond Season. Very classy. Tell us more about it. We are joined once again by Meg Booth, President and CEO of Performing Arts Houston, and Lee Strickland, Director of Artistic Programs at Performing Arts Houston. And if you have questions or want to comment on what's going on over at Performing Arts Houston, give us a call, 713-440-8887. Meg, Lee, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So we start off with, it's a beautiful brochure because when you open it up, it's full of great things happening. Mm-hmm. Inspiration behind the season. And Lee, I'll start with you on this. Knowing you're putting together a Diamond Jubilee celebration of a season, does that change how you're booking?
It does. One of the biggest things is we wanted to identify a legacy company that we've been working with forever that maybe there hasn't been back in a while. And Meg and I early on honed in on the Joffrey Ballet, who no longer really does touring product anymore. They do a couple of runouts a year, but we haven't had them in over 10 years.
Oh,
but
wow.
in our first full season in 67, 68, they were our headlining event that year.
Wow.
So we wanted to work with them, and about 18 months ago, we reached out and started putting the plans in motion to bring them here in October.
And that's because Carol Channing wasn't available to come do Hello Dolly for us. Because that was also in the opening, right?
It was. It was.
Okay, so tell me a little bit what Joffrey's going to bring us.
They are actually doing Andrew Eggman's Midsummer Night's Dream. This is not Shakespeare. This is Midsummer Celebration in Sweden. It is a over-the-top production. It even has like a Swedish pop star that travels with it to perform. But it's a little bit of everything. It's really hard to describe until you actually see it, because it's not even really contemporary ballet. It is something beyond. And
you have a warning at the end of the description that says contains synchronized absurdity.
That is correct. Yeah, there is so much going on the stage. Like, one, you don't know where your eye will actually lead you, just because they use the entirety of the stage. I mean, it's the entire company. It's over 60 dancers.
Wow.
Are on stage at one time in many different scenes. And it opens up with the photo that's in the brochure of this giant hay dance scene that's going on. And it literally is one of the most magical first 5 minutes of a show I've seen in a long time.
Oh, wow. So, Meg, tell me, what excites you about the season and the development of it?
Oh my gosh, it is an extraordinary season. And in fact, some of the audience feedback that we've had already is that we have so many great performances, it's almost hard to make choices. There are two things that I am most looking forward to. In 2019, we began supporting Houston artists. And so while we are 60 years old, for about 54 years, we primarily focused on bringing artists from outside of Houston, both national and international artists, to Houston. We have augmented that by supporting Houston artists in 2019. And our 60th anniversary season will mark the first season that we have commissioned full evening works by Houston artists.
Wow.
So Ben Chavez and Harrison Guy are both creating full evening works. Ben is creating a work called Last Day County Fair, which we already gave a baby commission to, but he's expanding that to a full evening with an LP that will be published. We're still working on whether or not we can get it published before the live performance. And then Harrison Guy is creating a full evening work that honors the 150th birthday celebration of Prairie View A&M.
Wow.
So it is a narrative work that tells the story of a Houston story, tells a Texas story, tells the story of Texas Prairie View A&M.
I've asked this question. Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say I've asked this question of you folks before, but I'm curious, is there a story that the season tells? Is there something you're trying to say with what you've put together and how you've put it together that goes beyond just a bunch of performances?
That's a difficult question to answer. With more than 38, 40 different artists, not every single one is going to speak to the same theme. Mm-hmm. There is a theme within the 60th anniversary year of dreaming. And if you think about where our organization was, where Houston was 60 years ago, that we are stronger today than we have ever been in our 60-year history. We are realizing the dream of the organization when we were put together in 1966 as Jones Hall was opening. Many of the pieces, the Joffrey Ballet, their piece is a dreamscape. There are many of the programs on this season that are dreamscapes, but over and above that, there are so many different themes. We have an extraordinary theme of global music, music from many different continents. One of the music stories that I love the most, and Lee, you should talk about this, is a festival that he has put together about an American art form, bluegrass, which has traveled throughout an international diaspora. And so we're bringing in American bluegrass artists, Korean bluegrass artist, and then a Irish bluegrass band. And we're going back to Miller Theater, so it's free, a whole day that kind of shows how an American art form has traveled through the diaspora.
You talked a lot about commissioning Houston artists. I'm curious to inform people who don't know what it's like to put a season together, how does that look different than when it comes to, getting any other performer to come, international performer to come to Houston? How is it different when you're commissioning Houston artists?
Well, we actually do a process where it is an application process for Houston artists to apply to join our New Now program. And when we did our last awarding ceremony, we had about 80 different applicants, and there are 3 people that are usually chosen for that. With our 60th anniversary season, we kind of went off what our traditional model had been, which is 3 one-acts, to doing 2 full-length evenings for 1 year. We're concentrating on that, and we'll be back to our smaller one-act New Now with 27-28 season.
Gotcha.
But yeah, we start doing that. That application process usually is about at least 12 months before we actually before they perform.
I love that question too, because it really identifies the difference between producing and presenting. So we'll take an example on presenting. Meow Meow put together a program called Feline Holiday. She worked on it in her own studio in her own space, and then went out into the international market and said, I am touring this production. And so then we schedule the production, we bring her in, we present that production. But when you commission an artist, it means that you're actually getting in on the ground floor saying, I want to help you create this. And so, we may help work on any number of things: lighting, designers, stage management, production photos, press photos. There's any number of things that need to be worked on in the creation space, and it's a much longer engagement with that artist to say, we're going to be with you from inception all the way to when the curtain finally goes up on this piece.
I want to go back to Meow Meow, and Lee, I'll let you take this to explain to Michael, because we were going through there and I said, oh, Meow Meow, and he's like, what is that?
I'm like, I don't know Meow Meow.
Okay, Meow Meow. Several years ago, I was introduced to her and immediately fell in love with her. She's Australian cabaret performer, but takes on almost a persona of pre-World War II German cabaret.
Okay.
I had spoken with Meg for a long time about her, and then finally several years ago she was doing a midnight show in New York, and I was like, okay, we're staying up, we're going to go to the show, and it's going to blow your mind.
It was awesome.
As soon as we did, she was like, okay, we had to figure out how to bring her here. I mean, it's a mix of comedy, but also she does rich storytelling, and has an amazing voice. She's recorded with Pink Martini. She sings in multiple languages. She's just truly an amazing artist.
Like one of a kind, it sounds like.
Yeah.
How would you characterize, we only have about a minute and a half left, but what Houston shows, are they different, do you feel, than the international shows that you guys curate? Or is it does Houston have its own singular sort of art form that you're like, that's a Houston show? Does that make sense?
Yes, although what I would say is what makes Houston so special is our plurality, and that so many different cultures can exist and we can come together to celebrate difference together. So I think that's Houston's story. Not that we're homogenous in any way, but that we are plural, and that we can create spaces where we can enjoy that and learn about somebody else's differences.
Yeah. We've mentioned Meow Meow. I also want to mention some names you may be more familiar with are going to be in the season. Ira Glass, Alton Brown, and David Sedaris is coming back. Good friend of ours here in Houston. For folks to find out everything else that's in your season, because we barely scratched the surface, where can they go to find out more?
performingartshouston.org, or they can call me directly if they want to at 713-632-8114, and I'm happy to talk to anybody.
Dangerous.
I was like, wow, you're a brave man. Thank you both very much for coming, and we look forward to the new season launching when? When's the first piece of the new season?
First piece is August 7th.
And
that is with Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman.
Buried the lead there.
Right.
Meg Booth is the president and CEO of Performing Arts Houston. Lee Strickland is the director of artistic programs at Performing Arts Houston. Meg, Lee, thank you both very much for coming in and sharing this with us today. Remember, you can find out more by going to performingartshouston.org. And you can read all about it. We're going to continue with the show after a quick break. You'll get a little news, and then we'll be back. We'll be talking about today's top headlines, and then we'll be discussing Supreme Court rulings on Texas redrawn congressional maps. So don't go anywhere. This is Hello Houston.
Stay tuned. There's more Hello Houston on the way. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at houstonpublicmedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
Support comes from Metro. World Cup planning includes transit improvements intended to serve Houston after the final match. Metro provides bus, rail, and paratransit service and continues mobility enhancements across the region. More at ridemetro.org/Metro Now.
Good morning. Nice day today. Lots of sun. We'll get up to about 83. Some clouds move in tonight, a low around 70. Currently it's 77. This is your NPR station, KUHF. Houston. News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston. It's 12 o'clock.
Just ahead on this hour of Hello Houston, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick is exploring ways to close gambling loopholes that permit online prediction markets like Kelce to operate in Texas. We'll discuss this and more of today's top headlines. I'm Ernie Manouse.
And I'm Houston Public Media reporter Michael Adkison. We'll also talk with the University of Houston Law Center's David Froomkin, who will help us unpack the continuing legal battles over redistricting.
Plus, the executive director of the Houston Public Library Foundation shares how the library is helping get involved with Children's Book Week.
Also, we want to hear from you. Give us a call or text at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. You can also watch us live on YouTube by going to houstonpublicmedia.org.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, by Metro, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The U.S. military says the Navy helped 2 U.S.-flagged commercial ships pass through the Strait of Hormuz. NPR's Greg Myrie reports this comes as President Trump announced he has a plan to assist vessels attempting to get past the Iranian blockade.
The U.S. military Central Command said Navy destroyers transited the Strait of Hormuz and are actively assisting an effort to restore commercial shipping. As a first step, the U.S. forces helped 2 U.S.-flagged merchant ships make it through the strait. President Trump said Sunday the U.S. would support ships trapped in the Gulf, but did not specify what action the U.S. would take. However, the Iranian state media quoted a top military official as saying that Iran would target oil tankers and other commercial ships that do not coordinate with Iran before passing through the strait. The dueling U.S. and Iranian blockades have effectively shut down the strait. Greg Myrie, NPR News, Washington.
The Supreme Court has paved the way for people to access the abortion medication mifepristone by mail for now. NPR's Carrie Johnson reports a lower court restricted access to the pills nationwide last week.
That ruling Friday from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals required patients to obtain mifepristone in person, prompting confusion and lawsuits. Makers of the drug filed emergency petitions asking the Supreme Court to step in. Justice Sam Alito, acting for the High Court, has now restored access to mifepristone by mail, at least for another week while the justices consider the issue. Medication abortions account for nearly 2/3 of such procedures in the U.S. Doctors who prescribe the pills by mail have been sending them to people in rural areas and states where the procedure has been banned. Nearly 4 years ago, the Supreme Court took away the nationwide right to abortion in a decision written by Justice Alito. Carrie Johnson, NPR News, Washington.
The outcome of Indiana's primaries tomorrow will reveal if President Trump makes good on his threat to derail the campaigns of 7 incumbent Republican state senators who voted against his mid-decade redistricting push in the state. The primaries being held tomorrow in Indiana and Ohio will also test how the GOP fares against Democrats, with the economy and the fallout from the Iran war top of mind for many voters. NPR's Domenico Montanaro has a new analysis.
But Republicans maintain that at the end of the day, they will retain control, even if it's narrowly, and they point out that they're on offense in some places too. Well, at the top of their list is Michigan. A win there would throw a serious monkey wrench into Democrats' takeover plans, but they think that places like Georgia and New Hampshire could also be very close in the end for Republicans.
That's NPR's Domenico Montanaro reporting. From Washington, this is NPR News.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Tom Perumian. 7 people are injured, one critically, after an explosion outside a mobile home in Pearland last night. KHOU reports this could have been caused by some kids throwing a can of gas into a bonfire. This happened just after 9 o'clock last night. An area resident called after seeing and hearing the explosion. 7 people were hurt, all with burn injuries. Authorities say there was no obvious threat to the community immediately afterwards because the fire did not spread into other structures or vehicles. As many as 10 to 15,000 soccer fans saw the original FIFA World Cup trophy in Houston. Officials estimate that anywhere from 3 to 5 times as many fans as they had expected. Hundreds of fans lined up, waiting hours before seeing the coveted trophy. Mango Cartagena had been in line for 3 hours when he spoke to Houston Public Media.
For it to come to Houston, it's a big thing, and we're a lot of Hispanics out here, so we're probably going to be the closest thing to the World Cup,
The solid gold trophy will be presented to the winning team in a ceremony, but the team will only keep a replica of it. FIFA has toured the official authentic trophy across North America, which will continue in New Orleans. In sports, the Astros take 2 from Boston, including a 3-1 get-out-of-town win. The Astros return home tonight to find the NL West leading Los Angeles Dodgers waiting for them. First pitch from Dyken Park is at 7:10. Taking a check of your weather, we're set for a couple of really nice days here to start the week. Highs of 85 and 87 tomorrow. Rain chances come back on Wednesday, and there is a chance of precipitation for each day at the end of the week. Right now, partly cloudy, 77 degrees on the UH campus. Get more news and information. Go to houstonpublicmedia.org. I'm Tom Perumian, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance with Snapshot, a personalized program that bases rates on safe driving habits, at Progressive.com. Not available in California or from all agents. This is NPR.
Live from Houston Public Media and News 88.7, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now, Hello Houston with Ernie Manouse.
Hello. We are back again. Sitting with me today, the one, the only, Michael Adkison.
Howdy, how are you?
It's good to have you.
Second
here.
hour. I'm still alive. Still
you made it through 1 hour.
I made it through.
It's not as bad as they said it would be.
A lot of people were telling me. I couldn't even finish that. No, it's been great. I was telling Ernie before that it's almost like fulfilling a childhood fantasy. Maybe that's putting it too strongly. What I was saying to Ernie was I look back very fondly on the summer that Regis Philbin retired and they were cycling through different guest hosts for Kelly Ripa on Live with Kelly. I would wake up every morning inexplicably. I was a freshman in high school, but I thought it was so fun to watch and see who the guest host was. So it's kind of like, oh, I get to be part of the process now.
You do. You get to play the game.
Play the game
of Radio Thrones that we're going through here. My favorite part of that story when you told it to me before you told it on the air was that you would force yourself to get up early enough.
And it was 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
It was. There's that line in Hacks. Ernie and I both watch Hacks where someone says, if your day is starting when Kelly Ripa's is ending, you've got a problem.
Another great line from
Another
a great
great line.
show. Earlier in the show, we were talking about trash fees. And as always, we put polls up on our YouTube chat because remember, you can watch this show live on YouTube also. And the question today was, do you support Houston's proposed monthly garbage fee? And the choices were I'm okay with $5, not $25. Yes, $5 or $25 is reasonable. I need more details, and no, I don't support it. Well, number Number one, 39% of our votes came in with, I'm okay with $5, but not $25. Then it goes down. 33% where the 5 or 25 is reasonable. 17 need more details. I'm one of the 17. And no, I don't support it. 11%.
It makes you think. I think that what's really interesting, I will make a note as well. The city has said we're not calling it a garbage fee at this point. It's an administrative fee. So just with that caveat that the city has said this is an administrative fee, not a garbage fee. I think that it's really notable. We talked a lot about what other cities do and how much they're investing in garbage. And I made a note that, nobody likes to pay more. Nobody wants to say, yes, sign me up. I'll pay whatever it takes. Take my money, please. But at the end of the day, it's something's got to give is what most people say.
What we were talking about was proposed by the mayor, trash collection administrative fee of $25 a month you would have to pay, and that would eventually go up to, through increases, up to $25 a month. I had asked some questions about it, and our producers got back to us and said not paying a trash fee in major cities typically results in suspended service, hefty fines, and potential liens on properties. Cities may treat these fees as utility debts, accruing interest or potentially causing a homeowners association to step in or the city to enforce code violations. That's all good and dandy, but it doesn't answer my ultimate question. If you've chosen not to pay the fee and you're still putting your trash out on the street, what happens? Does it just gather up? And if they fine you, they fine you. But what do they do about that if you still don't pay?
It does seem like such an Ernie Manouse question of your mind goes immediately to the worst case scenario of, what happens when nobody pays? And, can I just, if I don't pay my bill, are they shutting off my trash services?
How
do I have
long
to put
can
my
I
trash?
get away with not paying? That's what my real question is. I get the New York Times delivered every Sunday to my house. I never read it. I barely take it out of the blue plastic bag it comes in. And I started because they had some wonderful deal where you got it, but you also got access to the online version.
Sure.
I like to read the New York Times. So I thought, that's great. And it was really cheap. And then they were going to raise the price. So I called them to cancel. They gave it to me really cheap again. Well, then the price went up. And my credit card had been switched because my credit card had been corrupted, or so I had a new card. So it was no longer working. I didn't know this. Well, at full price of having my Sunday New York Times delivered every week adds up.
Yep.
And so now I'm in administrative fee problems where I'm getting to pay a lot on something and I'm still not paying it. So
That'll do it.
It will. I think it's like $48 a month or something to get the newspaper delivered that I don't read.
That you don't read. Print is dying, and you're contributing to it, is what you're saying.
Well, I did think I was at least keeping the delivery person had a job because they were delivering.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
But since I'm not paying the bill, I'm not helping anyone there, and I'm hurting Ernie. So anyway, Chef Rob comments also on what we've been talking. Get ready to have piles of garbage in the streets, especially in low-income areas. That's my point, Chef
And that's a
Rob.
concern, yeah. I know that, again, Dominic is the one who's really, Dominic Anthony Walsh has really helmed this coverage for our news team. And I remember he did a reporting where someone had garbage on her street for several weeks before anyone did anything about it.
Yeah.
So to the point of get ready to have garbage in the streets, I think some people say it's already here. We're already at that point, and something's got to change. And so I think ideally that's the glass half full interpretation is that's what the city is attempting to do here. It is a hefty political battle. It's kind of silly to look at local politics and say, yeah, the garbage fee is going to be a big political battle, but it is that nobody likes to pay more, and this administration has really prioritized not raising taxes on anyone in spite of the city having the debt that it does. But this is something that I think a lot of people are going to be paying attention to what happens.
Every so often, there's a chatter in the YouTube group that just aligns perfectly with me. And today it is Chef Rob who's there. He says, fines are meaningless when you can't pay the bill.
There you go.
Absolutely true. We've got a lot more coming up on today's show. One topic we're going to be talking about that I've been slightly obsessed with. It isn't a current obsession. It is just something we should all be concerned with. And that is the redistricting and what the Supreme Court has been saying about it and how it impacts right here in Texas, not even just to mention in our own community. That's coming up. Also, keep in mind, Special District C Let's try that again. District C special election. Early voting is currently going on. District C takes up a big chunk of our city from the downtown heading out west. If you live in that area, it's your turn to be voting for your replacement representative at City Hall. So get out there and vote. It's happening right now. The actual final election will be on May 16th. That's just my public service announcement for the day. Now, into the headlines. Michael, take us in.
All right. In March, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick directed state senators to explore ways to close gambling loopholes that allow online prediction markets to operate here in Texas, raising concerns that state elections and sporting events could be manipulated for profit. Patrick's directive was the first time a state leader has officially acknowledged the existence of rapidly growing prediction markets, which let users wager on outcomes tied to anything from the weather to election winners and sports scores. Most prediction markets didn't operate in the United States before 2025. Any attempts by the Texas legislature to restrict prediction operators, however, would run into federal roadblocks as the Trump administration insists that oversight belongs to a U.S. agency, not the states. The Commodity Futures Trading Commission has taken vigorous steps to retain exclusive regulatory oversight, suing to block 5 states from taking legal action against predictive markets, including a lawsuit filed last Tuesday against Wisconsin. Prediction market operators argue that state gambling laws don't apply to them because users aren't placing bets. They're risking money on predictions. Very complicated subject. What are your thoughts on prediction markets? Should they be stopped in Texas or not? Give us a call or text 713-440-8870. Let us know what you think. It's a hefty topic. It's one of those that I'm like, I don't have time in my brain to wrap my head around all that. What do you think?
First of all, I'm tired of the word gymnastics that they do, where they're playing little games about prediction market operators argue that state gambling laws don't apply because they aren't placing bets. They're risking money on predictions. Please. You are not doing it. I don't understand how you don't see them as the same thing. Maybe I'm not smart enough to get it. If you can explain to me how it is not betting, please give me a call right now, 713-440-8870.
Help
I don't
Ernie.
understand how, this is the Educate Ernie segment of the show. I don't understand how that's not seen exactly the same way as betting. You put money down, and if you're right, you win.
I'm looking at some of the things that you can bet on right now. This is from polymarket.com. What will WTI crude oil hit in May 2026? We've got 90% saying $110 or higher. I assume that's barrels per day. And then 71% say $115 or higher. Iran closes its airspace by May 31st. 64% say yes. May 8th, 38% yes. It's just fascinating.
But it goes into what this whole thing is talking about, and what actually they're talking about. Lieutenant Governor here is that if you're involved, as we have seen up at higher levels in our administration, that you know insider information, so you know what's going to happen next, and maybe it's going to lead to this and that, and therefore you're betting on it. And insider trading, we have been against for generations. This doesn't seem any different to me.
It's just such a unique and of the moment thing, I feel. It's so uniquely in the digital age, the idea of predicting on whether or not something will happen, and specifically wagering on whether or not something will happen, and it goes beyond just sports. That we're talking about politics, we're talking about celebrities, pop culture, and just the idea of like putting your money behind that is so uniquely in this age, I feel.
So could I start one of these bets with, like, if the lieutenant governor doesn't get his way, I could do who is going to be Ernie's guest host tomorrow, and I can put 3 names down. I already know who it is, so I can wager all my money on that one. And then I win because I know who it's going to be, but we haven't publicly announced.
Hypothetically, I think that's the concern, is that you're going to have people who have outside influence really weighing in on this. Of course, how much money you're going to make by who's guest hosting Hello Houston. I don't think depends on how many viewers and how many listeners pay attention. But I think that's the concern, is that you're going to have people who, it's insider trading to a certain extent is the concern that Lieutenant Governor Patrick would put forward, that this is people who have direct knowledge at the way something is going to turn out, putting their thumb on the scale and weighing in. And so, there's a lot of questions about how this all works.
I kind of agree with the lieutenant governor on this one. I think that we need some kind of regulation. What I also don't understand is why it's a nationwide federal thing and not statewide, because states can regulate things just as well.
Right. And it makes me think of sports betting, that I believe that had to come down to a Supreme Court decision, that it is up to the states to regulate sports betting. And Texas has very adamantly denied that opportunity. It's been a political fight, I think, every year for the last several legislative sessions. So I have a hard time seeing Polymarket and outcome prediction markets having better chances at sports betting, but maybe it will go even further in regulating it a bit more.
Noah comments on what we said earlier over in YouTube. Legalese is an awful language to be fluent in. Yes, it is. Chef Rob, who I think is actually also guest hosting the show today.
You
He's
think
got
so?
a lot of good
He's got a
comments
lot of-
over here. Chef Rob says, yet the lottery is legal. It is not gambling because the odds are so high. Meh. Do you put money down on?
I don't gamble. I put my money where
Wait,
it's
it's
more
not gambling. It's the lottery.
Well, I just in general, I put my money where it's more assured. Like I know I'm going to get, if I put $13, I know I'm going to get a box combo at Cane's. Like that's to me a guarantee. I like to know where my money is going.
I had a friend who was so bad at gambling the last time we were in Las Vegas. I told him, why don't you just take your quarters and flush them down the toilet? You're going to have the same return on your betting, because everything he bet, he lost.
It's the rush. It's the rush, Ernie.
It is the rush. I don't get that rush. I don't have an addictive personality when it comes to
That was a humble brag.
substances or, yeah, I have addictive personalities about other things. Where's there a great pizza around here? Let's move on to our next story. If you have a comment on these prediction markets and should they be regulated and should Texas be doing it, 713-440-8870. Okay, here's a growing social media trend that's known as the teen takeovers, and it may be reaching the Houston area. Police in Katy responded Saturday night to a large group of teens at Katy Mills Mall with reports of possible fights and crowds running throughout the property. Authorities say the gatherings are often organized online, drawing dozens of teens to a single location, and in some cities leading to fights and disorderly conduct. Locally, officials say that they are watching closely with similar gatherings planned elsewhere in Northwest Harris County. Law enforcement says the concern is how quickly these events can escalate, and they are urging parents to be aware of where your teens are going. So, what are your thoughts on teen takeovers? Have you been caught in the middle of one? Should more curfews be enforced? 713-440-8870.
I was a teenager not that long ago.
Oh, God. Rub it in. Trust me, he's older than he's pretending to be. Go on, young
3-4 years.
whippersnapper.
No. It's one of the, I feel like, in my mind as we were talking about this, I picture just the Avril Lavigne music video where they crashed them all. I'm like, this is, it's the same story told differently of teens taking over, or not teens taking over, but, teens being teens essentially. But again, I'm not a parent, so maybe a parent would have
conduct is unruly conduct. I don't
Yeah.
care how you get there, you have to behave.
Plain and simple.
There it is.
Concise.
King Ernie has put out his edict.
Problem solved.
Yeah, I just think that, we gathered at the mall in our day, and you like how I said it like it was both of ours.
Our day.
In our
Back
day.
in our day. When we would text your friends.
Right. Well, we didn't have text. We would call on the phone chain.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah. But, and crowds gather. We still have gatherings of these crowds. The problem happens when things happen like what we saw at the barbecue cook-off, where it got kind of out of hand and rowdy.
Sure.
What happens when mass groups of people come together, and then there's drinking involved. And so I don't know how much drinking is involved in a Katy Mills Mall, but that all of a sudden gives you that lack of judgment that can then lead to more intense situations where fights break out and all the violence that happens. I would say I'm always weary now of large crowds, just in general. We've seen too many things of disorderly conduct happening there, and so they do bother me.
This makes me think of it's kind of the crossroads of what Jonathan Haidt writes about in his book, The Anxious Generation, if you've read that. The idea that we underregulate what kids do online and then overregulate the way they act in person we protect
Good
them and
point.
shield them from everything. But meanwhile, they go on the internet and they have access to any information they could possibly want. And it's doing God knows what to their brains and everything. Very interesting.
Has your day or night been disrupted by one of these teen takeovers? Have you been involved in one? Do you think they're all perfectly fine? Are you a parent and you're like, I know my kid's going and it's okay? Or I heard about it and my kid's not going? Let us know. 713-440-8870. Okay, a couple little things before we run out of time in this segment. Are you celebrating today?
I am celebrating, yes.
What is it?
It's a big day. Well, it's a couple things.
Oh.
Star Wars Day.
That's the one I was
May the
talking
4th. I figured that's what you're talking about.
The 4th.
It is also the Met Gala tonight. Very important.
Michael. Yes. I'm surprised you were able to make it into work today.
I know. Very important stuff is
Did you get
happening
done hot gluing
tonight.
your gown together or whatever you do?
I'll be there. I'll be there in person on the red carpet. You'll know when you see me. You'll know.
What is the theme this year of Met Gala? Do you know?
Fashion is art. So who knows what we will get tonight, but
do you watch it?
It's hard to watch.
On YouTube
it's just
now,
people.
everyone's streaming
Yeah,
stuff.
I can't do that. I need professional film cinematography.
You need Joan and Melissa Rivers standing out there.
I just scroll through Twitter and let the internet dictate what I think about everything.
Well, speaking of other things that you might watch or not watch, Amazon is reportedly considering a reboot of The Apprentice. And guess who's going to be the potential host?
Tell me who.
Don Trump Jr.
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, I suppose.
Would you watch it?
Would I watch it? Mm-hmm. I'll watch anything. If it keeps me entertained, I'll watch anything. So.
See, I never liked The Apprentice, but I loved Celebrity Apprentice. Because I just love to see just how badly behaved these celebrities would be.
You're going to get mad at me, slightly before my time. I've never expected we would have talked so much about my age, but I never really watched The Apprentice or The Celebrity Apprentice. I know Omarosa. I know... and I've seen her in...
You know her?
Well, personally, yeah. She and I go way back. Back when she was on The Apprentice. No, I know
Devil
the
Wears
moments.
Prada 2 came out this weekend saying that, you know what? Maybe the movie theaters aren't dead after all. Devil Wears Prada is doing very strongly. Just a couple weeks ago, or was it 2 weeks ago? 1 week ago, Michael, the movie came out. Super Mario Galaxy movie came out. And Hail Mary, Project Hail Mary have all done really well at the box office. There may be a resurgence there. I would just say this as we're wrapping the segment up. A lot of why it was such a bad summer this past summer was because you have to remember the writers and actors strike the year before. And so it takes a while for stuff to come through the pipeline. So maybe we're in a new golden age of box office. I don't know about that, but I do know we're in a new golden age of how we interpret redistricting and what's going on there. And the Supreme Court has chimed in, and it matters to us right here in Texas as well as across the country. We're going to explore more of that with David Froomkin, who's with us, Froomkin, who is with us from the University of Houston Law Center. That's coming up right after this break. You're listening to Hello Houston.
We know you value Houston Public Media. That's why you're watching right now. So take the next step and become a new member of the station you rely on. Every gift makes a difference. And what matters most right now is supporting the station that brings you the news and information you rely on. It only takes a minute to make a big difference. So join as a new member today at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 800-364-8300.
I'm Michael Schaefer. My partner Ellen and I have been proud supporters of public radio and TV for decades.
We rely on it daily for trusted news, culture, and entertainment.
But with recent federal defunding, stations like Houston Public Media face real challenges.
Now's the time to step up.
Give now at houstonpublicmedia.org
or call 888-909-0887.
Nobody likes paying the taxes they owe, so some don't, but that has a cost.
And if instead governments could collect more of what they're already owed, they'd have money to spend on their priorities, they could avoid some of those unpleasant choices.
I'm Kai Rizdal, the Tax Gap Chronicles, next time on Marketplace.
You can listen to Marketplace coming up this evening at 6:30.
Support comes from the Houston Symphony, presenting Grammy Award-winning violinist Joshua Bell performing The Elements in Concert, featuring a sound and music experience and works by Wagner and Strauss. This week, May 7th, 9th, and 10th at Jones Hall, houstonsymphony.org.
Tonight on Houston Public Media TV 8 at 7, Antiques Roadshow returns for more appraisals at Grant's Farm in St. Louis, Missouri. Then at 8, it's episode 5 of Ken Burns' The American Revolution. Tonight on TV 8.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870. or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now, Ernie Manouse and guest host Michael Adkison.
Last week, the U.S. Supreme Court made a pair of major decisions that could shape how congressional districts are drawn across the country. The justices have allowed Texas' newest congressional map to stand, overturning a lower court ruling that found that it had been racially gerrymandered. At the same time, the court struck down a Louisiana map that had created a second majority black district, ruling it unconstitutional. Together, these decisions highlight the ongoing legal and political battles over redistricting and voting rights. Joining us now to help us unpack both cases and so much more, David Froomkin, who's an assistant professor in law at the University of Houston Law Center. David, welcome back to the program.
Great to be with you.
For folks who have questions and want to join the conversation, 713-440-8870. Okay, in the first two that I even read about the Texas map and Louisiana map, I guess we're getting a picture of how the Supreme Court feels about redistricting. Sum up together what they say.
So last Monday, the U.S. Supreme Court reversed a district court decision that had held Texas's 2025 redistricting to be an unconstitutional racial gerrymander. The district court had produced a 160-page opinion that was carefully reasoned and factually detailed. The Supreme Court reversed that decision with scarcely any explanation. We got a little bit more insight into the Supreme Court's thinking 2 days later, last Wednesday, when the Supreme Court issued its decision in the long-awaited case of Louisiana versus Calais. And as many experts had expected, the Supreme Court in that decision decided that Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act will be dramatically pared back. I think it's not too much of an exaggeration to say that the U.S. Supreme Court gutted what was left of the Voting Rights Act in the Calais decision.
So basically, it is the Supreme Court supporting the idea that you can gerrymander when it deals with political ideology, but you cannot do it really along race or disadvantaged communities that over time, I guess they're saying they perceive are no longer disadvantaged.
Well, that's what they said, but taking these two decisions together in context, it seems pretty clear that the U.S. Supreme Court is adopting a different approach to racial gerrymanders when they favor the Republican Party and when they favor the Democratic Party. So in the Texas case, the district court produced an exhaustive analysis of direct evidence that state officials had a racial motive behind the new map. The Supreme Court reversed that district court's decision with scarcely any analysis of the issue, making it seem to be quite plausibly a political decision. In the Louisiana case, the district court had ordered the state to draw a new map to increase minority representation. So we see there the Supreme Court being inclined to regard a map as a racial gerrymander when it increases minority representation, not when it decreases minority representation. Seemingly different standards.
I guess I'm missing something here, and help me see the daylight between these two things. For me, from the whatever view I'm looking at it, both are basically saying the same thing, but coming at it from two different directions, which is when it is gerrymandering on race, we aren't going to endorse that. In both cases.
Well,
so you've got in the
that's
Texas
precisely
one
what the district
saying,
court found in the Texas case.
and they said that. Wait, so explain to me then the Texas case. What am I missing there? Because what I'm hearing is when the lower court said, look at, this was gerrymandered along race, the Supreme Court said, oh, okay, I see. I guess I'm seeing it now as I say it out to you. I'm understanding. They're saying that we can gerrymander the state along race as long as it increases the one side of the aisle, in this case, the Republican side of the aisle, because it's going to benefit them with seats. But if you were to apply what they did in Louisiana toward Texas, then they should have come up with an opposite decision, right?
I think it's hard to avoid that conclusion. Certainly, the Supreme Court didn't do us any favors by refusing to explain itself in the Texas case.
Right. Okay. I understand that now. It took me a little bit to get there with you on it, but it just feels as though they're both a long race and they're both saying, we're always going to what aids political gerrymandering, not racial gerrymandering.
So it's certainly true that the U.S. Supreme Court is telling states, if you're engaged in political gerrymandering, there are no federal law constraints on what you're doing, and encouraging states pretty much to engage in maximal gerrymandering going forward.
David, you mentioned that in your read of the decisions, you interpret the Voting Rights Act as being, your word was gutted. Walk me through that. I think that in the immediate aftermath, we saw the justices characterizing where this leaves the Voting Rights Act in different lights. I would love to hear your thoughts on where that law stands today.
Before the passage of the Voting Rights Act, states across the South constructed their legislative districts in order to thoroughly submerge minority voters in majority white legislative districts across the state. That denied minority voters any meaningful political representation. There were no districts in the state in which they could elect representatives of their choice. The Voting Rights Act sought to correct that situation by requiring states to provide minority voters with an adequate opportunity to elect representatives of their choice. That's what the Jingles test sought to do. Under Jingles, when there was a sizable enough population of minority voters in a geographically compact area of the state, and there was also racial polarization in voting in that area, such that in the absence of a minority opportunity district, there would be a total submergence of the minority voters. Then, under those circumstances, the state had an obligation under the Voting Rights Act to construct a minority opportunity district that would enable those minority voters to elect representatives of their choice. What the Supreme Court has decided in Calais is that states no longer have an obligation to construct minority opportunity districts under those circumstances, and has established much more stringent requirements for minority plaintiffs to demonstrate that they are entitled to the construction of a minority opportunity district. Most significantly, the Supreme Court held that the minority plaintiffs have to show that the construction of an additional minority opportunity district would not result in a diminution of the maps serving the partisan goals of the legislature that enacted the map. So in other words, if the legislature's goal is to produce as many Republican districts as possible, and the plaintiffs can't show that there's a way to produce another minority opportunity district without eliminating a Republican district, then they can't win. But of course, the nature of these states is that that will practically always be the case. So plaintiffs now have no recourse under the Voting Rights Act in almost every situation in which they were bringing these cases.
So kind of going off of that, this is all very complicated. It's tough to keep everything track. But let's say I'm a voter and I feel I live in a gerrymandered district. What do I need now to prove that in the court's eye? Like, what would it take for the court to say, yes, that is a gerrymandered district? Where does that stand today?
So this is a helpful question because we should distinguish two legal principles that are often conflated but are really distinct principles. One is, when do you have a gerrymander? And the other is, when do you have a situation of what we call racial vote dilution? The latter is what the Voting Rights Act is supposed to protect against. The Voting Rights Act is supposed to prevent a state from submerging minority voters into majority white legislative districts such that the majority voters are deprived of a meaningful opportunity to elect representatives of their choice. Challenges to gerrymandering rest on a different theory, which is about what the goals of the state legislature were in adopting the map that it adopted. But that's not a question that you have to ask in the case of a racial vote dilution challenge. And in fact, the architects of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act were very clear that that statute is supposed to have a results test, not an intent test. What the Supreme Court has done in Calais is to reintroduce an intent test into Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, frustrating the core goal of its architects. So going forward, racial vote dilution is not going to be a meaningful cause of action because we're asking basically the same question that we would ask in a gerrymandering case where we already know that plaintiffs have almost no recourse under federal law.
Okay, so here we go again. You're the group of B people who live in a state run by A people, and your entire community is B people, and yet the A people who are drawing the maps break the B group up among a whole bunch of other districts so they have no representation because they're made smaller groups within the bigger A people groups. And so the Supreme Court is saying, okay, that's how it is. You have no recourse there. Unless you can prove when the A people gathered, they said, let's break up that B group so they can't get representation. Correct?
That's right.
Doesn't matter what the outcome is, as long as the intent wasn't there from the beginning.
That is what the Supreme Court is saying, and it's worth underscoring once again that is directly contrary to the goals behind Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which were to establish a results test, not an intent test.
So does this just stand until another case and maybe another group of justices or the justices have switched and they reinterpret it? Or is there any other recourse in the short term?
There doesn't seem to be any further recourse. I mean, you might think that Congress could try to pass an amendment to the Voting Rights Act to reestablish the results test, but it's hard to imagine how Congress could be more clear about establishing a results test than it already was in Section 2 as it existed. The more troubling thing in the background here is that the Supreme Court majority seems to be indicating that it is also adopting a novel constitutional theory, such that even if Congress were to try to restore the protections of Section 2, this Supreme Court majority would still be inclined to gut those protections on the basis of its constitutional theory. So I think you're right to suggest that unless there is a change in the composition of the Supreme Court, this gutting of the Voting Rights Act is likely to be permanent.
In all of these decisions, or in both of these decisions, more appropriate way to put it, where do we stand on how often redistricting can happen? Have they addressed anything in that regard? Can they just every year redistrict if things are shifting and they don't like it, or is there any kind of guidelines that we're paying attention? We always did 10 years, but that was just custom more so than anything else.
There doesn't seem to be any federal constitutional constraint on the frequency of redistricting. The reason that states engage in redistricting every 10 years is because they have an affirmative constitutional duty to do that in order to comply with the one person, one vote rule. Because there's a new census every 10 years, the state has to redistrict in order to ensure that the legislative districts are equipopulational.
So why didn't they just gut Section? Why did they gut it and just not cancel Section 2? Why do they leave it existing but take all of the teeth from it?
Well, I think that that approach is of a piece with how the Roberts Court has often operated, which is that they want to try to minimize the gravity of what they're doing, that they issue an increasingly large number of decisions with massive political stakes while trying to suggest that they are not active interveners in the political process. They want to characterize the decision as minimal, even as it has an absolutely seismic impact on the electoral process going forward.
Kind of going off of that note, as we wrap this up, you know, Louisiana has obviously taken hold of the moment and moving forward with potentially suspending their primary elections. I know you're more on the legal side of things rather than the political side of things, but how do you see this playing out in the not so near distant future? You know, do you think we're going to redistrict again, you know, at the turn of the decade? Is this just the standing that we're going to have precedent from now on of you can redistrict whenever you want? How do you see this all playing out?
The Supreme Court has sent a message to states that they have carte blanche to engage in maximal extreme partisan gerrymandering, and we're already seeing the consequences of that message. Florida today, as I understand it, has adopted a new map that is seeking to add up to 4 additional Republican congressional seats. Legislators in Louisiana, the subject of the Calais case, and also in Alabama have indicated that they intend to pursue redistricting this month in order to try to eliminate minority opportunity districts that had existed in those states. There are a number of other southern states in which I expect that legislators will have a similar goal, if not in 2026, then certainly in 2028. And I think it's worth observing that there's strong reason for thinking that the Supreme Court rushed out its decision in Calais precisely in order to give states enough time to engage in these redistricting processes before the 2026 midterms. You might expect a big decision like this to come down in June. They rushed it out in April.
Mm-hmm. What other cases are moving through the court right now that we should be paying attention to when it comes to voting rights?
Well, nothing that compares in magnitude to the Calais decision. I mean, we haven't seen a case in decades that is of this magnitude. The Calais decision straightforwardly means that minority representation will be wiped out across the South. And this is an absolutely seismic change that is going to have a generational impact. All of the gains made by the Voting Rights Act over the last 40 plus years are going to be wiped out in just a few years as a result of the Calais decision.
Last question as I let you go. Surprised how any particular justices came down on this?
It's the 6-3 pattern that we have become familiar with.
Wow. Well, David, as always, thank you for shedding some light onto this. It's very troubling and very concerning. And it'll be interesting to see how it plays out as we see different states reacting to it in different ways and what it will mean both in the short term and long term. Very fascinating. David, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
David Froomkin is an associate professor of law at the University of Houston Law Center, and we always enjoy having him on to clear up these things. Even when they're so complicated, they're still confusing. Coming up next, Children's Book Week is upon us. We'll let you know about how your child can get involved as Hello Houston continues.
It's not just your car. It's the one that brought your kids home from school, took you cross-country, held memories, laughter, even a few breakdowns. When it's time to let go, give your car a new purpose. Donate it and turn memories into meaningful support for this station. Plus, you'll enjoy free and easy pickup, potential tax benefits, and a simple donation process. Your gift supports the programs you and your family love. Donate today and help keep public media strong. Call or donate online.
Want to binge All Creatures Great and Small? Catch up on Nova? Or revisit Ken Burns documentaries? You can with PBS Passport. With a gift of $5 or more per month to Houston Public Media, you'll get access to PBS Passport that lets you watch your favorite programs anytime you want. Support the programs you love and enjoy them on your own schedule with PBS Passport. Make your gift now at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
Houston Matters highlights the people, places, issues, and ideas that define Greater Houston, and we do it live on the air weekday mornings at 9 on News 88.7, but we know you're not always available then to listen, so subscribe to our podcast wherever you get yours, or find each day's program to stream online at your leisure at houstonpublicmedia.org. And reach out with questions or comments anytime. Email us at talk@houstonmatters.org.
Support comes from Metro. World Cup planning includes transit improvements intended to serve Houston after the final match. Metro provides bus, rail, and paratransit service and continues mobility enhancements across the region. More at ridemetro.org/Metro Now. Support for Houston Public Media comes from listeners like you and from Houston Parks Board, a National Estuaries Program watershed grant recipient, restoring 8 wetlands across Houston's bayous. Learn more at houstonparksboard.org.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now Ernie Manouse and guest host Michael Adkison.
This week is Children's Book Week, a time dedicated to celebrating books and the joy that they bring to young readers. As the longest-running national literacy initiative in the country, this event aims to promote literacy among young people by connecting them with books and authors through events at schools, bookstores, and libraries. Much like the Houston Public Library, which strongly encourages early literacy through its many educational resources, programs, and, of course, free access to books. To tell us more about how the Houston Public Library helps foster a love of reading among children, we're joined once again by Nicholas Sawicki, the Executive Director of the Houston Public Library Foundation. Nick, welcome back to Hello Houston.
Gentlemen, thank you for having me.
All right.
Good to have you in on such an important week as Children's Book Week. I want to remind everyone, if you want to join the conversation, give us a call, 713-440-8870.
First question, what's your favorite children's book?
Oh, Where the Sidewalk Ends by Shel Silverstein. Although my 2-year-old daughter would say Bluey right now.
That's a good book. Yeah, Bluey's everywhere. Bluey's everywhere. My sister-in-law works for the Houston Public Library, and one of her tasks is to always catalog what the most checked out books are.
Mm-hmm.
And Ernie's going to laugh because we were talking about it earlier, and he had never heard of it. Dogman, always number one.
Oh, always number one.
I don't know Dogman. I know that Performing Arts Houston is doing the Dogman, the musical
yes.
in their new season, but I don't know what Dogman is.
I keep it on my nightstand every night.
Do you really?
No. Oh. It's a great book, though.
It's going to be one of those days, isn't it? So in today's day and age, here I'm going to get political real quick, and then we'll move back into Are there new challenges you folks are having to navigate with the library in what is available, and is that I don't want to necessarily use the word problematic, but we were talking before the segment even started. There are degrees people take in library science to understand what needs to be curated and how this works, and for sweeping legislation to come and tell you how to do your job. Is that a challenge you face on a daily basis, or is it something that things still function as they should?
You know, my colleagues at the Houston Public Library do a great job every single day getting people what they need to better their lives. And so the library has a policy. You know, it has had a policy since it was founded in 1904. We have a great letter from Julia Adkison responding to someone saying, well, I don't want this in my public library. The library is the space where everyone can engage with materials, quality materials, in a real and substantive way. And so the library navigates that by saying, listen, we'll make sure it's in front of the right audience at the right time, and that people who should have access to these materials, you know, there are some things that children just probably shouldn't have access to. You know, it should be shelved properly for adults. And that's a very intentional and thoughtful way that library professionals who are trained to do this make. They make those decisions. So, the library team is very careful about navigating that, but at the end of the day, they are getting people the resources they need.
So, resources kids need now because it's Children's Book Week.
Children's Book Week, 107 years strong. We're so thrilled. You know, the library historically and today has always been overrun by children in the best way possible. You look at you look at the first pictures of the first library on Travis and McKinney, it is filled with children. And the Boy Scouts were constantly picking what their favorite book was, and the Girl Scouts were doing the same thing. It's always been a place for children, and now the library has a critical role. We're seeing significant issues in the digital age with children and how they learn. So the Houston Public Library is making significant investments in physical material and getting them into the hands of children, because physical material, it increases neuroplasticity, it increases retention, it increases comprehension, and it increases attention spans. And if we can do that and also enable families to read together, the success for children is significant over their lifetimes. And there are substantial studies by the University of Chicago that prove that.
Well, I've always had a very fond love of books, which you can tell by where I live now. It's just packed with books still. A realtor said to me, you don't want to put in bookshelves because people don't want those anymore. I'm like, are you kidding? Bookshelves? Where do you keep all your books? Like, people don't have them like they used to, which is very disappointing. But when I was a child, even before I could read, my mom, when I would wake up, would put a stack of books in my crib, and I would open them and I would turn the pages and look at the pictures. And I did that. And I think even that early, before I could read, started that love of books.
It's critical. So, we partner very close with the Barbara Bush Houston Literacy Foundation, and they've invested greatly in the Houston Public Library's family place learning libraries to teach families to read together. But also, it's just providing space for kids to come into the library and explore all the things that it does. We have a great exhibition right now in the Julie Idison building on the art of duck and moose, which is by Houston native Kirk Reedstrom. And there's a squiggle wall where the kids can come in and paint. We have the Dr. James and Betty Key map room, which has great resources for kids to learn about space and cartography and all sorts of things. And so many different exhibitions and opportunities and programs. We do 50 story times a week across the city, over 200 a month. Out of the 247,000 people who attend library programs every year, out of the 2.4 million visitors to the library, a huge number of those are children every day. And those are the primary folks that the library is catering to in a significant way.
Nick, we were talking about the challenges that libraries have, and I think on the one end there is what Ernie mentioned, which is the political and the regulation of children's books. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you've kind of alluded to this, of this sort of economy of attention and what draws kids in. Is that something that libraries are seeing firsthand, that kids would rather pick up an iPad if given the choice between an iPad and a book? And if so, how do you respond to that?
Sure, we don't tend to hand kids iPads.
Sure.
But really, I mean, the data tells us, if you give a kid a physical book, there are all those benefits, right? If you give them an iPad, there are always the detractions at the offset that is really hard to make up further on. We have a program called 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten. If you can read with a kid 1,000 books before kindergarten, their chances of graduating high school go up astronomically.
Wow.
All right, that seems like an awful high number, though. 1,000 books?
That's a book a day for 3 years.
That's what's currently on your shelf right now, waiting to be read, right?
Yeah, probably.
Same. So,
well, I'm also thinking about a big book. You're talking about small.
Right, even little small books.
Okay, then I can get to
books,
the 1,000.
board
Okay.
books, yeah. But, there's always a challenge getting people into any door, right? If you think of it like a business. But the fact is, more and more people visit the Houston Public Library every single year. We saw a 10% bump last year in visitors. We went from 2.2 to 2.4 million physical visitors. And we're seeing a huge demand on digital resources, which it took till 2024, but that finally passed physical circulation. So we are seeing more demand on the digital side, but at the same time, we are seeing more people physically visit the library than ever before in Houston because they understand that those resources are there for them.
Yeah.
And it's the library's job and the foundation's job to support the library in this effort to make sure that we give the kids the right resources they need for their success.
A lot of people don't realize a lot of families can't afford books, don't have access to books at home. So how does the library close that gap? What's the program you folks do to make sure there's accessibility?
Yeah, this resource gap, which is how we refer to it at the foundation, because not everyone can afford those books. And the library has 4 million books in its collection still that are circulating. And so any day, 6 days a week, someone can come into the Houston Public Library and find those resources and attend a story time, attend a workshop, so you can learn as a family the effective ways to read and learn together. To attend parenting classes so you can understand a child development. There are all these resources that the library has, and if you go onto the library's website at houstonlibrary.org, every event, every day, it does about 12,000 events and programs a year with a very small team. I mean, the library only has between 400 and 500 staff at any one time, and not all of them are running programs. Anyone can walk into the Houston Public Library and partake in these resources and programs, and I think that's a really beautiful thing.
Really quickly, too, the importance of reading aloud to a child. And because you talk about the physical book and a child having the book, but also hearing the stories, right?
Yes. As a father of a 2-year-old, again, who loves Bluey, which I'm kind of over Bluey personally. Don't tell her. Don't tell her. I'll read it to her as long as she wants.
Secret.
But the audible action of reading to a child helps them develop those neuroplasticity and motor skills that just help them communicate earlier, faster, and better. And if they can communicate that way, then we see significant benefits over the term of their life, really.
Yeah.
That they have this ability to express themselves in really wonderful ways, starting at a young age. And that's what a core part of the library's mission is, to have this rich inner life for the individual, right? I mean, there are the strong economic impacts that the library has. There are the developmental impacts. But really, there's that philosophical idea that this is a democratic institution that enriches everybody.
Very last thing before we run out of all of our time, what are some of the events happening to celebrate Children's Book Week?
Well, like I said, there are 50 story times happening this week across the city of Houston. Anyone can attend those with their children. And then we have some great author talks coming up over the course of the next several weeks outside of National Children's Book Week. and just so many other great things going on, all that can be found at houstonlibrary.org.
Thank you, Nicholas, so much for coming in and sharing the joy of reading.
Well, thank you for having me.
Nicholas Sawicki is the executive director of the Houston Public Library Foundation. And that brings us to the end of the show. Believe it or not, you got through it.
Wow, made it through.
Thank you for carrying me today. I don't know that I said it, but
Carrying
you have been. I've been feeling a little under the weather today, and you've been here to lift me up and make me sound like I know what I'm talking about. So I appreciate that. And we thank you for watching and listening as well. We will be back tomorrow with more conversation, more great guests, including Houston-based chef and TV host Chris Shepard will be here. This is Hello Houston on News 88.7.
Thanks for listening to Hello Houston. Join us every Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. to talk all things Houston. The Hello Houston production team includes Garrett Bowman, William Menjivar, Jen Altai, Todd Holslander, and Jim Kavacek. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at houstonpublicmedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.